32, voting session for Westchester Borough Council, February 21st, 2024. First order of business is a public hearing, ordinance to amend Chapter 97, subdivision and land development, and Chapter 112, zoning related to electric vehicle charging stations, and to require improvements during land development to accommodate present and future level 2 EV charging stations.
Hold it down. I will start by introducing some exhibits because this is a ordinance hearing. There are certain requirements, especially when it's amending your subdivision ordinance and your zoning ordinance, that we want to be in the minutes to reflect that we follow the state law, which is the municipality's planning code. So the first is that we advertise tonight's hearing on February 6th and February 13th. The second is that we sent a copy of the ordinance for public inspection. We sent that to the Daily Local News and to the Chester County Law Library on December 29th, 2023. The third thing is that your planning commission has to review any edits to your saldo or your zoning, and they did that at their meeting on January 30th, 2024. And their recommendation is that you do not adopt this, and their minutes reflect their conversation about that. And then the final one is the Chester County Planning Commission did review this ordinance, and they provided a letter to the borough dated December 14th, 2023. So we met all the procedural requirements. It's amending 2 different chapters of your code, subdivision land development, which only applies to something that is either a subdivision of land or land development, which basically is any development that occurs other than the development of one single family dwelling. If you had a lot and you were just building one home, that would not constitute land development. 2 or more residential, and basically any other type of development, commercial, industrial, that's all considered land development. I'm going to turn it over to Will because he's going to explain a little bit about the impetus for this and can then maybe address some of your questions or concerns.
Evening. We've had many conversations about this, different boards, commissions, committees, and borough council last year, but as it's been a few months and we have some new faces, I thought it might be helpful to do a little recap how we got here. In short, the EV ordinance is a mandate for developers, most importantly developers of large multifamily projects, to install a minimum number of EV charging plugs during construction, and also to future-proof new buildings by doing very small, inexpensive things that will streamline the expansion of EV charging installation in the future as EVs, the proportion of EVs on the road grows. Want to step back a little bit and talk about why. Go back to 2018. At that time, Borough Council adopted very ambitious clean energy goals for the community, including that all personal transportation would be electrified in Westchester by 2050. Again, that is very ambitious, but it's a noble goal because EVs are a vast improvement on internal combustion engines, and those benefits are really pertinent to Westchester. They use about 5 times less energy to accomplish the same task as an internal combustion engine vehicle. Overall, less costly to operate and maintain, although that's sort of marred by the fact that so far EV adoption, the EVs that have been purchased have been expensive cars. That is getting much, much better. They emit 80% less emissions overall. They emit 100% less emissions while driving around in Westchester. And they are almost silent, creating quieter streets. Each EV makes Westchester a healthier and more peaceful place to live for everyone, but particularly our low-income residents who tend to live closer to busier roads than wealthier people do. So it's not my own bias. Objectively speaking, I think EVs are great and worthy of supportive policy. And the low-hanging fruit policy-wise is to make sure that new developments support EV adoption by making charging convenient, especially charging at home. Again, that's why multifamily is so important to get right here. So that's the overarching goal of the ordinance. With that in mind, as Kristen described, again, the proposed ordinance would accomplish 2 things. Require commercial multifamily to install a minimum number of charging stations during construction through the SALDO ordinance, and require all developments, including single-family residential, be built with basically EV-ready means expanded electrical panel capacity and conduit run to parking spaces so that it's really cheap, really inexpensive, really quick to install EV charging when the time comes. The ordinance also addresses maintenance, safety, and accessibility items. A few examples include ensuring charging stations are accessible by occupants of the property, protected from damage, have appropriate signage, including marking parking spots as reserved for EVs, well lit for safety and convenience, and handicap accessible. We looked at a lot of ordinances and they were surprisingly silent on making sure that these EV spaces are handicap accessible. So ours addresses that head on. With that in mind, Jeff, can you pull up that PDF? Our ordinance, there's sort of three types of EV charging. Level 1, which is standard electrical outlet, electrical demand similar to a toaster or a hairdryer. That's can do 3 or 4 miles of range per hour. If you're driving less than, say, 25, 35 miles a day on average, this is all you ever need, ever. Level 2 is sort of the Goldilocks. It will get you 10, 15, 20 miles of range per hour. So imagine wake up, your car is charged, you drive down to Cape May for the day, you come back, you plug it in, you wake up the next day, say, I want to drive to New York City and back the same day. You can do that if you have level 2 at your home, at your apartment building. And then level 3 is what you see popping up at Wawa. That's where you can charge, get 200 miles of range in time comparable to filling a car with gas. And this is where all the federal money is going into level 3 charging on interstate highways and turnpikes and things like that to make road trips more viable. Definitions that we hit on often, EV ready. Again, that is basically making sure the electrical panel can handle additional demand of level 2 charging and a conduit run to the space. If you have those things, it's really, really cheap to install level 2 in the future. And then EV installed is, again, having that plug installed during construction so you're ready to go from day one of occupancy. And without those things, without EV ready, you try to retrofit. That's what we're running into here. We'd like to electrify our administrative vehicle fleet. Now we're talking $20,000, $25,000 a spot because we don't have these things, because there was no EV ordinance in the 70s or whenever this building was originally repurposed for the borough. So again, our ordinance deals strictly with level 2, and these are the thresholds that we're proposing. Non-residential, so think about, we probably don't have too many developments like this in the borough, but a commercial only, maybe a small office park or something opens up, newly developed. 10% of the spaces would be EV ready for future expansion. 5% would be EV installed, 1 out of 20 spaces. For context, about 1 out of 10 cars sold in America last year was electric. In multifamily, because home charging is what you vastly prefer if you own an EV, the standards are more stringent. We're looking for 20% EV ready for future EV charging, but still for now, it's only 5% EV installed. I would anticipate over time this number get more stringent, but for now, I think it's a really nice balance. And then in single family, we're never going to require anyone to install EV charging if you're building a new home or a garage. But again, we want to make sure it's efficient and cheap to do so in the future. So those are the thresholds spelled out in the ordinance. I thought it'd be helpful to look at these in the context of projects that we're familiar with. These projects are exempted because they're already in the land development process. But if this ordinance was in place when these projects were originally submitted, this is what the developers would be looking at. So 410 South High Street, they're proposing around 170 parking spaces. I don't know if that number has changed significantly since the original submission. They would be required to make 30 of those spaces EV ready for the future, but only 9 actually have plugs for today. And I said 10% of cars sold in America were EVs last year. We don't really have good local data, even statewide data, but I'm thinking in Westchester, it's probably higher than 10%, or it would be if everyone had convenient charging. And then lastly, think we looked at this at maybe December's council meeting or one of the committee meetings, but we looked at a bunch of different ordinances from across the country and some local. West Goshen's is proposed. I don't think that's been approved yet, but theirs is in the works. Phoenixville adopted one maybe 2 years ago. Just so you can see that we're not proposing anything really outlandish or anything that hasn't been done before. There's some subtle differences, but I think, we looked at what everyone was doing and came up with a balanced decision.
They've authorized it to be advertised and move forward to hearing.
So that's really it. The ordinance costs taxpayers nothing, or the borough administration nothing. All costs would be borne by developers. Developers may always and do often petition Borough Council to waive ordinances if there's a specific hardship. And this is the single biggest free thing that all of you can do to accelerate EV adoption and all of the great things that come with it that I mentioned earlier. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Actually, I have a question for Kristen. Kristen, did I hear you say that someone recommended we not adopt this?
Planning Commission.
The Planning Commission, did they say why?
No, there was no staff present. It was sort of during Kevin Gore's transition. One thing I do recall from the minutes was that they suggested that we incentivize rather than mandate, which I think is sort of chuckle-worthy. That's like saying we don't need a zoning ordinance. We'll incentivize and ask developers to do these things that the community cares about, and it will work out. So that's
So
my
I
two
could read
cents
the
on that.
minutes real quick. It says, Mr. Cherry expressed concern regarding unnecessarily burdening homeowners and the power grid. Mr. Borough thought that EV readiness should be mandated to ensure different multifamily buildings don't have different standards, so he supported it. Mr. Doherty noted that EV requirements will increase the price of affordable housing for tenants, and some residents may need a new panel, thereby increasing the cost of renovations. Mr. Burrell noted that because it's in Saldo, you could get a waiver from that. Mr. Cherry noted that EV readiness is not related to life safety or accessibility, and there should not be in the Saldo. And Mr. Ott said he's a local sustainability company owner. He commented on the need for overall vision of sustainable communities and suggested considering a more complete sustainability toolkit instead of having it in the ordinance. As far as one of the things I mentioned to Will when he was doing this is I wanted to understand just for myself what the cost would be for the single family dwelling. And I think you said it wasn't significant in terms of what the additional power that you need to make it ready is insignificant as far as the cost of the home. Is that what you had said? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, you'll see it. One of the things we talked about is the market is dictating a lot of this. And so multifamily developers right now most likely are going to be building them anyway. Like if they want tenants, if they want to satisfy the tenants' demands, and as he said, 1 in 10 is an EV vehicle on their own, they're going to be making these available. So when Phoenixville Borough was really the first one in Chester County to be adopted, I contacted the solicitor that prepared the ordinance and spoke to some of the people at Phoenixville and just said, like, how has it been received? Have you had negative comments from developers? And they said, absolutely not. In fact, developers are going over and above just because the market's dictating that, not because we're mandating it. So I don't think anything you're doing is outlandish, that it's going to really cause concern from people that are developing. And the one thing I wanted to understand was the homeowner cost, and he indicated it's not significant.
Thank you.
As far as the electrical grid too, that's a criticism you hear a lot about EVs, but PECO will give you $2,000 to install a level 2 plug. So I think that tells you about the readiness of the electrical grid. They are very excited to take business away from big oil and the grid can handle it.
Thank you,
Hello.
Mr. Williams. The one question I have is about residential.
Mhm.
The property on Walnut Street, and I think it's Ward 4. The homeowner attached it to his lamppost.
Mhm.
And when he wants to charge his car, he just flips the light on outside, goes under the street, and I'm saying he, it could be a she, I'm not sure. They charge a car
Mhm.
and then they flip it off. Regulations for that type of, what would happen if every homeowner decided that that's what they're going to do in the borough? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a bad thing.
Okay, so why is it a bad thing? I
Um,
mean, looking at it, you would think it would charge in the rear of the property so you don't see the wires.
yeah.
But why would that be a bad thing?
Um, there's a lot of reasons. I think of tripping hazards, vandalism. What happens if a snowplow hits it? Um, walking down a street and having to step over an extension cord.
I could, I'll help you with all that on
Yeah.
that house.
Yeah.
The guy was very ingenious.
Yeah.
He got a gutter and put a drain cover on top of the gutter, so he ran his cord under the,
Yeah.
inside the gutter. So that's protected.
Mhm.
I understand hitting it with snowplow. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And he still has it attached to borough property, which he should be fined since he's installed it. He was told to take it off, has never done that.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised college kids haven't stolen the thing.
Me too.
But is there anything that would, other than what we've discussed, not be a good idea? Say everybody on Minor Street decides to do that type of, and that's type of installation was ingenious.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
It was an ingenious way of doing it.
That, my understanding of that was they proposed it. We've never encountered anything like that before. There's nothing on the books that we don't like it. Gut says, no, this is not good. If there's 30 of these on every block, it's going to be a problem. As much as we want to facilitate EV adoption, that's kind of a really tough way to go around about it. But there was just nothing on the books that we could say, no, you can't do this, and here's why. So, this ordinance doesn't address that. This is one of maybe 4 or 5 EV related initiatives that will check all the boxes. Like I said, this is the low hanging fruit. This is new development. That's the easiest. Get it right going forward. That's the point of this ordinance. And then we need to figure out how to give people without off-street parking convenient charging that's hyper local to them and affordable. And then, and only then, I think, should we then put regulations in place that would deny those type of like personally owned, personally built, personal access public infrastructure in the public right away. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm going to just, and wasn't aware of that and I wasn't asked to look at it, but I would venture to guess there's something in your code that prohibits that. So you definitely have the control over your public right of way and what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So I think there's probably, it doesn't specifically say you shall not install a electrical vehicle charging station in the public right of way, but there's definitely more general vague language that I think we could probably hang our hat on if we needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was ingenious.
And well done, honestly.
Well
Yeah.
done. I was just amazed that I was, not this ordinance, I thought it could be attached to it, but I could just see, metal poles with all these charging stations that
Yeah.
you take from your front door light. That's
Yeah.
all.
Curbside charging is popping up in the right of way
Yeah.
in urban areas, but it's owned, maintained, and built by either the municipality or a partner of the municipality. And that way, everything is built to a standard. It's consistent. The use of it is dictated by the municipality in conjunction with their partner. And that's great because the other thing is people can piggyback on our commercial electric rate, which is much cheaper than residential. So, we can, without incurring any cost, we can subsidize it in that sense. So there's good ways to go about that. And like I said, there's more EV initiatives coming, but
Thank you.
again, the low hanging fruit is getting
That's
it right
for
going
another
forward.
day, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
I have mostly garages in my ward, but I have similar situations, maybe less complicated, but similar where there are cords going across sidewalks and under contraptions. And we need to do this because this is the low hanging fruit. As you're saying, we need to start somewhere. We need to start here so that we're moving forward with good intentions. And then we need to get on. I'm good friends with many people who live in places with zero off-street parking, and they're begging for this option. And they know they cannot purchase an electric vehicle
So
until something is available. So please keep moving and please help pass this ordinance.
will do.
Councilperson McGinnis has a question.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, Councilperson McGinnis has a question.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Say that one more time? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
all right, hopefully you can hear me. With that, Will,
Brian?
yes. Can you hear me? Yeah, for
All right,
Will.
While they're figuring that out.
Ask your question.
Yes, I will ask my question. But my question is with putting this in the ordinance and having the developers put these into their projects, I mean, what's the maintenance cost and how do we ensure that they don't just put these in there and not maintain them and then years, go by when sales pick up and things like that and people move in and they think that they're going to have somewhere to park their car and like, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? They're not just checking a box and.
Yeah, I think there's not really direct language about operational management, but there's implication there that it works, that it's accessible and available to occupants of the property. There's something in there about legal occupants, which means we wrote that meaning, again, take that example of maybe a small business park that pops up. We're not mandating that be publicly accessible if the property itself isn't. But in that section, there's, I think a very clear implication that it's functioning and accessible to lawful occupants of the property. And the other thing, I emailed you about this today, but what we've learned, we have 5 plugs at 3 public locations. People are very vocal when there's something wrong. Our station out here, it's reserved for our cars exclusively during the day so that we can charge our plug-in hybrids. If someone leaves one plugged in over the night or the weekend, I will guarantee an angry voicemail first thing Monday morning waiting for me because, there's an expectation that it works and that it's available. A lot of EV owners use a platform called PlugShare. It's like Yelp for EV charging infrastructure. It's like you go on Yelp and say, I want cheap tacos in this zip code. Same thing. I need this type of plug and I want it to be free in this zip code. And it'll show you all those places. But part of that too is you get rated, just like Yelp. You leave reviews. People review your stations, and so there's all these opportunities for negative public feedback, and I think that will help the owners keep their amenities functioning.
Is-
One other thing, I also think that if it's required on your subdivision land development plan and they're shown and there's a note on the plan and that gets approved and recorded, that acts as a covenant against the property and you can enforce covenants. You can enforce notes on subdivision plans through an enforcement mechanism. So there would be a way that they've provided them, but essentially they're never working. They never have worked. And, people living there complain to the borough codes enforcement officer doesn't have to, but could, if we wanted to, enforce that as a note on the plan.
It's much
Okay,
better.
because I was going to ask if we needed to put something in the ordinance that was related to that, but you're saying no, legally, if it's in the ordinance that they have to put it in, then there's a legal ability to enforce that it's working in 5 years. Okay, thanks. Brian?
He would like to know what other municipalities have passed an ordinance like this.
The only ones I'm aware of in Chester County are Phoenixville Borough and West Goshen Township will be within the next couple weeks. But I do know that DVRPC and PennDOT have been issuing manuals with model ordinances. So it's definitely something that I think that you're going to see more and more of in the coming years.
All right.
I make a motion that we accept the EV ready ordinance as presented tonight.
And I second that.
All right. Sean? Oh, public comment.
Thanks. Hi, Jim Wiley, 401 West Lafayette Street. I used to be on the Sustainability Committee. Now I serve on the Chester County Environment and Energy Advisory Board. And I'd just like to speak in support of this proposal. I thank Will and the others that have worked on this and for your consideration. And yeah, I wanted to bring up that both the Chester County Planning Commission and the Advisory Board have been working on. This is part of our toolkit for, electrifying transportation, and we have some solar toolkits for HOAs as well. And then, as mentioned, the DVRPC is trying to encourage municipalities to do things like this. And I think this sets a minimum standard for new construction, and I definitely think it's the way we should go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right. Do we want to motion again? Do we need to? All right, then Sean, do you want to call it?
Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
He texted me yes. Can we accept that?
Cannot.
Cannot.
It has to be able to be heard. If he can chat it, at least then it's publicly seen, I think. Okay.
All right. Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Patrick McCoy is absent. That's 5 votes in favor.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, as long as the public can hear him make his vote, that counts.
Okay, so
Can't text if the public can't hear it.
are you calling him? Okay, we're past. We know Brian is in support, although it can't be on the record, but we're good. All right, thank you. So the hearing is closed and we will move on to the Borough Council works or voting session. And so calling that to order and the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll have that here. Comments and suggestions from the residents in attendance, and we've got Daryl coming up to the.
Darrell Cook, 506 South Walnut Street. I'd like the street area in front of my property for my exclusive use. Thank you. I'd like the street area in front of my property for my exclusive use. Thank you. It's been requested previously. Does the bid pay for the parking restriction postings on Gay Street? Thank you.
Any other comments from those in attendance? All right, one other thing that I will bring up that was suggested by residents that are not able to attend this evening has to do with there is a proposal for development on 205 Carter Drive in West Goshen, and there is a zoning hearing on Monday where that will be discussed regarding some requests for variances, thank you. So for some variances regarding flooding. And so the request was that someone from the borough also attend that meeting to understand more about what's going on and voice any concerns that might be in relation to this zoning request.
So I can add a little bit more to that. This applicant is for 205 Carter Drive. They're going to the zoning hearing board in West Goshen seeking variances to permit the installation of a basin, stormwater management basin, within the 100-foot buffer. So West Goshen zoning ordinance requires that if there's a stream or a water body, you have to stay 100 feet off of that for any structures. They're requesting, there's already a stormwater basin. This property is already developed. There's an office building, a flex office building there, and there's already a stormwater management basin there. But those structures and basin were built before West Goshen adopted an ordinance that required a 100-foot setback. So if that building and stormwater management facility wanted to stay in its current location, it's considered a lawful non-conforming condition. There's nothing West Goshen can do about it. But because the applicant wants to remove and demolish the existing building and actually retrofit and upgrade the basin, then they're required to comply with the 100-foot setback standard. And they can't do that given the size of the lot. So they're asking for a variance from that setback. The second thing is they're asking that no new construction or development be located within 50 feet of the floodplain. This application, actually, the applicant started by getting what's called a conditional letter of map revision from FEMA. So FEMA maps out what they believe the floodplain to be. This applicant actually hired a floodplain engineer who did detailed analysis of where the floodplain actually is, sent that information in to West Goshen Township to have to say if they agreed or not. I think they actually sent you a notice, and then they sent that to FEMA. FEMA approved it, and FEMA said, okay, you're right. Your analysis is that the floodplain is not where we said it is. It's actually where you say it is. So that they got that approved, the letter of map revision, and that actually decreases the amount of floodplain that's on this property. But even with that decrease, they're still proposing things within 50 feet of where the floodplain would be. So they need a variance from the West Goshen ordinance. The other variances relate to construction within steep slope areas. So they're going to have a portion of a parking lot, and the drive aisle will be built within what they call man-made prohibitive slopes. So it's 15% slopes. It was actually the West Goshen engineer agreed that these were not naturally occurring steep slopes. When the property was constructed, they put the slopes in place as a result of the grading, so they're considered man-made. And then the other one is the building is there a variance to allow the building to be set back 30 feet from the property line where the requirement is 50 feet. So the applicant presented this application to the West Goshen board, and the West Goshen board chose not to take a position. Your Director of Public Works did send correspondence to the zoning hearing board requesting that 2 conditions be imposed. And they are that the construction not allow the floodplain to be elevated. And also that, the second one was, that there be no additional stormwater that comes off the property post-development. The applicant has indicated that they will accept those conditions. So those have already been accepted. If you wanted to take a position adverse to any of their zoning relief, you'd have to hire a lawyer to go to the hearing. And we wouldn't have to have a lawyer, but if you wanted to present actual evidence that the zoning hearing board could consider to potentially then oppose the variances, you would need to have some sort of expert testimony be presented. You could, and one thing we thought about was that you could send Sean or you could send Don Edwards to go, and you could decide if you could listen to the application. You could tell them that you could definitely get party status. As an adjoining municipality, you would be granted party status. You could have whoever you decide to go listen and decide whether or not there's some additional information that you felt you needed to bring back to council. You could ask that the hearing be continued. You guys could consider that additional evidence, and then at the subsequent hearing, be given an opportunity if you felt necessary to present evidence. So as a party, you have the right to not have to show up that evening with all of your evidence ready to go. The applicant will take their time to do it. It most likely will be continued to another date, and it will be the fourth Monday in March is when they hold their hearings. So I'm pretty confident that if you chose that you wanted to have somebody from the borough represent the borough's interest, that you'd be able to do that Monday evening and then request a continuance if you felt it was necessary to actually hire experts to present testimony. I also know that there's another application that's going to go first. It's for the West Goshen Shopping Center, and I think that's probably going to take a long time. So this applicant may not even get much time to present it all on Monday.
Ms. Camp, our previous building and zoning person, Kevin Gore, sent things from the borough, sent two requests from the borough that he thought was pertinent to the borough. And they have accepted our requests, and they're going to enforce those.
I texted the applicant's counsel to find out if they are in fact going forward on Monday, and she indicated that they are. And she said two things. She said, the borough already sent a letter asking for 2 conditions, which we are fine with. And she said there was also a question from the resident as to whether the edge will remain gated. It will, and the hotel's main entrance address will be at 205 Carter Drive. There will not be any vehicular access, permanent vehicular open access from 205 Carter Drive through the edge. It will only be a gated emergency access.
That was one of the questions that Vice President mentioned. She heard from a resident. They were concerned that there was going to be a secondary road from the hotel straight to through the edge and straight to Rosedale Avenue. But you just stated that will not be the case.
There will be an access drive. It will be gated. And the other thing is that this is just the zoning. You can participate in the land development. Some issues that maybe your residents have about lighting, landscaping, or buffering, that can all be presented by the borough through the land development process. We will not lose that opportunity. So. This is the thing, it's much smaller. And that could be something you could ask to stay out of condition and
It doesn't hurt to do that because it's a real concern of the people that live on Penn Street. Yeah. They don't want to cut through, going through that section by Mostello Park.
So what are any other questions from anyone here?
Can we request that someone from the borough go to the meeting on Monday?
Okay. Do we vote on that? That work? Okay, so
I would like to make a motion.
Second.
all right, any comments from anyone here in
I have a
the,
comment on the motion. Ms. Camp, the comment on the access road not being able to be opened, going straight from the property to Rosedale. Can we make that part of the request? Because that way, because it's going to come right,
I would love to add that to my motion.
because Ms. Bain would love that because it'll come right to her back door. So, okay, we would add to the motion that the access road gate stays locked and not used as a thoroughfare. Thank you.
All right. You got,
Yes.
all right, Sean, you want to call us to a question?
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Hey, hey.
Mr. Travis? Yes. And Ms. Shimoni?
Yes. All right, any other items to be brought up by residents here or anyone else? Okay, all right, we will move on to comments from Borough Council and the mayor. Well, the mayor's not here, but Borough Council. Do we start, Lisa?
Good evening. Welcome to 2024. Happy New Year, everyone. I just wanted to recognize our emergency services and public safety comrades, colleagues, for all of the hard work and frankly, dangerous work that they take in support of this community. We did have a fire on Penn, not Penn, oh my gosh, in the alley, right? Thank you. I knew it was a P. Prescott Alley in December, right after the holiday. I want to send condolences to that family, but also want to thank all of the men and women that helped support that property and that family during that time.
Greetings from the sweetest ward in the borough, the 6th ward. I know I couldn't top last time. I had 14 sweet shops. Now I have 15. It's just amazing, the A1C that goes on in the 6th ward. Starting on Sunday, we start Restaurant Week in the borough. Please spend time uptown if you're fortunate enough to get a table because they're very busy. The Restaurant Week's very, very popular. The new sweet shop is called Bookstore Bakery. It's right next to 151 Whiskey, right on Gay Street. It's a unique concept. They sell hardback books in there. That's the love of Jonathan, the one of the owners, and then Jessica does the baking. She makes sweet tarts from egg tarts, muffins, and various different pastries that they sell right there at the shop. So we always like to give a shout out to new businesses so people know they're there. Thank you.
All right, I will go. Hello to everyone. Happy close to New Year, being that we're in February, but being this is our first time of work sessions and voting sessions. But I'll just start with a thank you to all the residents out there who are passionate and supportive and have great ideas for our community and really want to be involved and support this borough and make it even better than it already is, which it's a pretty awesome place to live. So thank you to all of you and looking forward to being part of this Borough Council this year and working with the team here and everyone who's out there.
Brian Travis, Ward 2, newly elected Borough Council member. I wanted to thank the Ward 2 voters for selecting me to be in this office. I also wanted to thank our Public Works Department for their work and their overtime during the last couple storms that we had. We had some trees come down. It's quite a scene. And I just wanted to send a shout out to our Public Works.
I want to make sure that you make your reservations for Restaurant Week, as Mr. Flynn stated. So make your reservations February 25th to March 3rd. And I want to make the point that 9 Prime is open and taking reservations. I don't think you're going to make it in that week, but that's okay. You can make reservations for May. Get your tables. Thank you.
All right, Brian? No, Brian? Okay. All right, we will move on. All right, items for discussion tonight. First item is a motion to approve a sewer maintenance settlement agreement, Spring Hill Realty and Cambridge Square Shopping Center.
So I can handle this one. So starting in November, the borough received correspondence from a lawyer representing the Cambridge Shopping Center. The property owner's name is Spring Hill Realty, Inc. The borough responded to a clog in the sewer line, which was in the right of way of Gay Street. When the borough went out, there was also, they tried to investigate where the clog came from, and it backed into, I guess, the Cambridge Shopping Center, and realized it's probably one of the restaurants within the Cambridge Shopping Center that had some sort of oil or grease trap that then caused a problem in that lateral on the actual shopping center property, but then led into this, we're calling it a lateral. It's a 6-inch lateral, but it's within the right of way of Gay Street. So the property owner spent about $20,000 to fix the lateral. The Public Works crew went out and determined that they don't have any records indicating that that particular pipe within East Gay Street is a borough-owned pipe. There was no sewer plans. They hadn't had a history of maintenance of that pipe. The property owner, though, wrote a letter and said, well, it has to be a public pipe. It's within your right-of-way, and there's multiple property owners that connect into it. You typically would not allow, and it violates the public utility code for a private property owner to have a pipe that other property owners are connected into. So it's not unusual for the borough to not have records of every sewer pipe that's out there. I mean, obviously your mains and your significant pipes within your rights of way, you do have that, but not all of your sewer infrastructure in an old borough with old properties the records aren't as good as you'd like them to be. So meeting with the Public Works Department, we thought that a good resolution was that we would agree to split the cost. And they have asked that in addition to splitting the cost, which is about $14,000, I guess the number was a little bit higher than what I said. It was 14,000 is the half. They also want just to know that going forward, the borough will agree to maintain this pipe. My sense of it is that if it's in the public right of way and there's multiple properties that connect into it, it is probably likely a borough pipe. The fact that you don't have good records of that is not unusual. So all the property owner is asking at this point is split the cost of the repairs and agree that going forward, the borough will maintain it. And your Public Works Department said they have no problem with acknowledging that. So that's what's being asked of you.
What does maintenance include for something like this?
Again, if something would clog, if there was something that caused a clog or a break, it would have to be repaired. One of the other things that hopefully we learn from this is that you do have regulations in your sewer code that require grease traps in restaurants and facilities that have grease. And we need to make sure that that's being enforced and that there's periodic inspections and or requesting of reports to show that the grease traps are operational, because that is really what causes a lot of the problems. So.
In addition to responding to problems, the borough invests money in lining its sanitary sewer infrastructure to prevent infiltration of groundwater and exfiltration of sewage into the groundwater. And that's a program that we invest anywhere from, in lean years, $50,000, $70,000, in heavy years, up to $200,000 in lining our sewer pipes.
Ms. Camp, I do recall reading this, and I thought the split was about $9,000 and some change. I hear you saying 14,000. And okay.
Their original demand was 14. Increased it. They said they had additional bills come in that brought it up to about the 18 number. So I'm sorry, the $9,340.
That's fine. I just want to know where the other 5,000 came from. So thank you.
The question I have is on that property, I guess there's about 10 individual businesses inside that property. Are we sure that all 10 of them are paying sewer rent? It's, I can understand, it's easy to say we own the main. Mr. Metric, could you have someone look into that to make sure that each one of those properties are paid, or maybe it's the landlord that pays the sewer. I don't know. Yeah, maybe the landlord pays it. But when someone's forceful telling us that, we have to maintain the main, which we do, and their stuff came out of one of the buildings, I think we're being more than generous of wanting to split that, in my opinion, no, because you caused the problem. We didn't cause the problem. So thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions from anyone here? Anyone want to make a motion? Or do we not, do we make a motion? Yep.
I would like to make that motion. I feel like this property owner acted responsibly in dealing with what happened and having the borough question whether or not we own a sewer that's serving multiple units. As a property owner, I feel like that they've done a lot, and I think that we can accept what they've asked and move forward.
I'll second that.
All right.
Statement on the motion. The fact that the comment on the motion, the fact that Ms. Vicario said that the landlord acted in good faith. Well, he had 10 buildings there that were going down into one main. So the other 9 buildings couldn't use their toilets. So I'm not so sure that they had a choice not to fix what they had to fix. Thank you.
All right. If no other comments, Sean, do you want to call to question? Yeah. Any public comments?
Okay, Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
No.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Travis,
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni.
Yes.
The vote is 5-1 in favor.
All right. Number 6, motion to approve environmental covenant at 301 West Gay Street and lot number 6, Hannum Avenue lot.
This is something I briefed council on a little bit last night, and what we decided to, and what we're recommending council do is table this motion till next month when we can bring in the applicant's engineer and representative to speak to council more fully about what the contaminants are, what cleanup has taken to date, and the public can ask questions of that person before we enter in any agreement.
Any concerns from everyone here? Anyone here? No? All right, we will table that. All right, number 7, selection of boards and commissions members. We'll start with the first one. Ann Skillman was the one applicant for the one vacancy of the Historical Commission.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Ann Skillman to the Historical Commission.
And I will second that.
Any questions or comments from rest of council or anyone in the audience here? Okay, Sean, call to question.
Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Travis,
Yes.
and Ms. Shimoni.
All right, our second vote is for Westchester Campus Committee. And what I will add to this is that I had a very nice message from Mr. Lathbury, Woody, who is a fantastic person, as we all know, and has done a lot for the borough. And he messaged me earlier today that he would step back from this, and he wanted to support Caleb. He thought that Caleb would be a great applicant in addition to the committee. And so my recommendation is that we vote on Caleb for the Westchester Community Campus Committee.
Can I make a recommendation that we make a motion for both the Westchester Campus Committee and the Tree Commission? Caleb Wolfram for the Westchester Campus Committee and Jamie Paxson for the Tree Commission.
And I second that.
Any questions from, no? No? All right. Sean?
Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn.
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis, Mr. Travis,
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni.
Yes. Okay. Are we okay with Mr. McGinnis? We miss you, Brian. Next month. All right, the next item on discussion is the short-term rental ordinance.
So hopefully council received my memo to try to outline where we are with this issue. It started out in April of 2022 and a zoning enforcement notice was issued by Kevin Gore as the zoning officer to the owner of 26 West Union Street. That is a 4-unit multifamily building that I guess a neighbor had noticed there was parking by out-of-state residents or out-of-state license plates and brought it to the attention. And Kevin realized and went on the Airbnb website and saw that it was in fact being one of the units, maybe 2 of the units were being leased as short-term rentals. The property owner filed an appeal to the zoning hearing board, and we were preparing ourselves to go and defend the ordinance. It is our position, the borough's position, that the current zoning ordinance does not allow short-term rentals anywhere within the borough. Short-term rental being the transient use of a dwelling, whether it's a single-family detached dwelling or a multifamily dwelling. You do allow transient overnight lodging in hotels and in bed and breakfast. So that's the basis of what the notice of violation was sent for. Again, in preparing for the zoning hearing, the applicant brought to the borough's attention and was going to raise as a defense her belief that the borough was selectively discriminating against her and selectively enforcing the ordinance. And she had provided information about, I think, 6 or 7 different rentals that she was aware of that are within the borough currently at the time that we were doing the zoning hearing. So I said, let's bring it to council's attention. Let's see what they want to do. See if they, this is a hot topic in municipal law right now and zoning. A lot of municipalities are looking at the issue and determining whether they want to specifically prohibit it or specifically allow it, and if so, under what conditions. So that's the path we went down. We had a couple different conversations with your planning commission and your smart growth committee, and then ultimately council, where we ended up with, I believe, was 4 members of council were willing to allow the use, but limit it to the town center district. So that's what we were ready and prepared to have an ordinance hearing for in December. And at the smart growth committee meeting in November, the matter got tabled. I was not at that meeting. I believe that Mr. McGinnis had asked Mr. Gore to research some additional topics, and I'm not sure what happened with that, to be honest. With 2 new members of council, we thought it's important to bring it back. There are, and there have been various emails that have been sent to council people as well as borough zoning officer indicating that these uses are going on within the borough. And so my position or my advice to the council is you should make a decision one way or the other. The status quo of ignoring the ones that you've been told about and not citing them and not proceeding forward with the appeal that was pending. If you're going to prohibit it, we need to go forward on that vein. Or if you're going to allow it, let's figure out what a consensus or a majority of council is willing to do and get those amendments going forward. So that's where we are, and just wanted to open it up for comments and discussion, I guess.
Ms. Camp, I have a question. We do know that they exist, and I think the debate is where, if they're allowed in residential or the town center. Could we grandfather, if we were to limit them to the town center on a go-forward basis, can we grandfather the ones that are existing? If they come forward and say, let's say we require the license or rental fee or whatever it is that we do for rental properties, grandfather those in as existing, and then, the ones that are new ones, limit those to the town center?
Not really, because the only way to do that, the grandfathering is like a legal concept of nonconformity, lawful nonconformity. So by doing that, we would be saying that we believe that the current ordinance allows them. And I mean, there may be a way to go about it in terms of legalizing what's there and then creating separation distances like we do for student homes. I know one of the conversations was if you allowed in the neighborhood districts, the NC1, NC2, you may want to limit the total number that's allowed in those districts. We'd have to take a look at where the existing ones are and how far away they are from one another to see if we could do some sort of separation requirement. I do think you could say it would be hard to police. There's only a maximum of 10 that would be permitted. And then it's like a first come, first serve for who gets the permit first. I think you could have a way to do that. I'm not sure I would do it on the first come, first serve. I would try to do it as a separation requirement or a total density within a neighborhood maybe. But as far as grandfathering in, I don't think you can do that because our interpretation and the position that we've taken with respect to specific applicants is that it's not permitted under today's ordinance.
And can you help me recall or just state what the requirements are or limitations are around bed and breakfast in the borough?
I think they're allowed in your neighborhood districts by special exception, which is a process that has to go to the zoning hearing board. But that's different than a short-term rental because in a bed and breakfast, the owner must reside there and just rent out specific rooms. And they also have to provide some sort of meal. So it's just by definition, it's a different use. But I believe it is allowed in your neighborhood districts by special exception.
Thank you.
Ms. Camp, the recent information that I received about the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania saying that we could prevent short-term rentals in residential areas, but the exception was the owner had to live full-time in the house. Is that the way I read it from the Supreme Court?
So I think you're talking about the slice of life case.
That's correct.
Right. So Slice of Life is in the Poconos. It was an entity, an LLC that was created called Slice of Life. And they were operating a short-term rental. They were an investment company that went and bought a property in the Poconos. They never lived there. And they only rented it as a short-term rental. The municipality, and I'm forgetting the name of it, cited them and said, this is not a single-family detached dwelling the way we define it in our zoning ordinance. And the Supreme Court held that that was accurate and held that it was okay that a municipality does not have to allow transient use of dwellings within their municipality. So as long as you allow transient overnight lodging in hotels or in bed and breakfast, you can have residential zoning districts where you require the dwellings be permanent occupants, whether they're owning it or leasing it, but transient use is not something that you have to allow within a residential district. And that case was very specific to how the definitions were in the ordinance as far as what a dwelling is. And your ordinance is very similar in terms of defining a dwelling. It's basically a permanent location for people to reside as a family unit where you have house, kitchen facilities, sleeping facilities, that kind of thing. So we believe that the same rationale that the Supreme Court made in that case applies in the borough. And that's why we suggested that Kevin issue the notices of violation that he did, where you have dwelling use, somebody's using it not as their permanent residence. The ordinance that we had put forward for you would specifically call out and define what a short-term rental is, which would be overnight occupancy for less than 30 days. And it was going to be allowed in any type of dwelling unit within the town center district by conditional use. So those applicants would have to come and get council's approval. There weren't very many criteria that we put into it. It was mainly parking that we addressed. And then they would also, one other thing that you did is we prepared an amendment to your property maintenance regulations, specifically your rental requirements, so that you'd have to get a rental license if you were going to operate a short-term rental. So those two went hand in hand. So some of the more administrative provisions were within your property maintenance code in order to get the rental. It was an annual rental license.
Why did we select the town center and not the rest of the borough?
Well, it was split, and I think there was a lot of different conversations, and we wasn't able to get consensus on allowing it in the other districts. And so I think the thought process was you had consensus to allow it in the town center. I don't want to speak for what people think. I think they thought that the neighborhood districts were more neighborhood permanent dwelling situations where potentially a short-term rental could have a negative impact on the quality of life, and that your town center is where you allow a lot of your commercial uses, you're allowed your hotels, so it fit that district more appropriately, I think was the thought process.
I mean, there's an alley separating NC2 and Town Center behind my house. So I don't know. I mean, for me, it would be this, it wouldn't be any different. So that's why I was asking the question is why are we drawing the line specifically in Town Center?
I think they were also looking at where your current ordinance allows hotels only in the town center. And so thinking that the transient use of an overnight stay is similar to a hotel in some respects, it would fit within that same.
I think there was a lot of discussion. The town center primarily came in my mind from the hotel limitations, but the town center also took it to another place where if we put parking requirements in, it makes sense, say in my neighborhood down near the university, that you have parking requirements for a rental unit, but it doesn't make sense in town center because there is no parking available in most of it. So how would we accommodate that? So there is a difference is the most important thing that I took out of that. There's a difference between the density of town center and Ward 5. That there should be variations, but I am a big advocate that we allow this, but I also want regulations in place. I want parking requirements very clearly specified. I don't know exactly what they need to be, but they need to be there, and bathrooms and all sorts of things that are lined up that we make sure that the people who are renting this have safe, secure places that are not, taking parking away from residents who live here. But so we need to do it in a very organized manner. But I also think that having Westchester be a destination for outside people to come and stay in is hugely important. And I think it's a really bad move to say, no, we're not going to let anybody in here. And the residents cannot, make a few bucks off of their extra space if they have it. I think it's a detriment to the whole borough.
I guess the question is you can't rent a room in my house, for instance. Like I have an extra spare bedroom. I cannot rent that as an Airbnb. It would have to be a specific unit. My house would have to be divided into 2 units in order for that to work. Is that correct?
Yeah, the definition we specifically put at the end, the leasing of 1 or more bedrooms in a dwelling is not permitted as a short-term rental. If you're renting it, you have to rent the entire dwelling for the short-term rental use.
But it could be a B&B from what you said earlier?
That's
because
2 different things. So a
if you
bed and
have
breakfast is
breakfasts?
bed and breakfast is a completely different use. And you'd have to get,
But if he wanted to get a B&B license to rent the 1 bedroom, as long as he gave somebody like a bagel in the morning, that could be like the same thing, right?
yeah, and
Okay.
we're trying to pull up the regulations on bed and breakfast to make sure we're clear on them.
It seems so restrictive. I'm having a hard time coming up with an example of like a legitimate Airbnb rental that the owner wouldn't just opt to have a long-term rental. And that's what I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, the reason why I voted for the town center only was because we have very, very quaint, historic neighborhoods. And to me, full disclosure, my family owns Airbnbs, full disclosure, okay? But they're not in neighborhoods. They're outside Longwood Gardens. They're over by Marshallton, the 4 Dogs, and the one in Brigantine. So we do own Airbnbs, but they're not neighborhoods. My biggest fear is I call them mini motels. because you can go there and stay 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, whatever. And we have a lot of children in our neighborhoods. And I didn't like the idea of our neighborhoods the kids in our neighborhoods not feeling safe when they see strangers every other day or every couple days when they're next door. Because a lot of our houses are twins and we share porches, and you see strange people going in and out of the house. It's pretty unsettling. So that's why I wanted it for town center only. And that way there, it would be more regulated as well. So.
Ms. Camp or Mr. Metric, do you know approximately, I know we don't know definitively how many we have, but approximately how many are in the borough?
Right, it's hard to determine, but we've looked at VRBO, vacation rental by owner, and Airbnb at different times and for different times to reserve rooms. And we've seen as little as 8 to 9 total properties in the whole borough, with the vast majority of them being located probably in the town center. You don't get an exact address until you contact the owner, to as many as 12 to 15 available in the borough on those 2 websites.
Yeah. I know there's one can't decide if it's on Ward 1 or Ward 7, but it's around the corner from me. Which is not in the town center, obviously.
There's definitely one across the street from the Greatest Cross on Gay Street. St. Agnes has a beautiful pink door. It's amazing to see the people going in and out there when I go to mass at 8 o'clock in the morning. That, you know what? No one makes noises. There's no dirt. There's no over cars because they're parking in the rear. So it's well maintained. And then, of course, I have a friend who has 2 of them. I think either in your ward or up in the first ward. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's invested a lot of money. And I refuse to talk to him about it because I don't want to lose his friendship over it. So
But you suggested he get a violation.
I did. He was a great basketball player, so he's used to getting violations called on him all the time, walking mainly.
All right, so I have a question. I know we still need to open it up for public comment, but I guess my question is, it sounds to me like everyone that's sitting at this table, and I know Brian, you're out there somewhere, but is leaning towards approving something at the very least town center, if not slightly beyond that, right? So then my question for you is then, if that's the case, what are the next steps so that this doesn't drag on till, like, let's try to get something done before April, right? So that we don't hit that year mark, like what do we need to do?
Oh, I mean, before we tried to pinpoint the policy conversations, and it really came down to what districts. And then if you're only going to allow it in town center, I think we're good to go. I think if we cover those comments, but if you allow it and open it up into NC1, NC2, the issue was, as Ms. Vaquero was saying, what are the additional regulations? Is it additional parking? Is it a limitation on, we tried to do a limitation. We talked about doing a limitation on having it be primarily owner occupied, and we did it based on 182 days of the year the owner had to be there. The applicant's counsel actually notified us of a case that had been decided in a different state where they held that violated the interstate commerce clause by basically it was discriminating against out-of-state owners owning short-term rentals. I read the case and felt that probably that same holding would apply here. So we suggested to council you not go down that route. So I think it's really, and I'm happy to send a follow-up email with sort of like the policy conversation or policy decisions, and then everybody could respond independently back, and we can sort of pull the board on where you all are. And then we can put that into the ordinance format and bring it back.
Okay, so you're going to pull.
Yeah, I
those
mean, I think what I would
conversations
do is send something to everybody as far as, do you want A or B? And you answer the question, the districts that you want it in, if you allow it in this district, are these the regulations that you want, or are there any additional regulations? And then we'll see where a majority of council is. Because again, we had many iterations of this ordinance, so it's not going to take long to pull that back together. It's just sort of understanding where council is.
All right, yes, Brian?
You're on, Brian.
Thank you. Regarding this ordinance, we looked at this before, and the issue here is town center is too restrictive. I was just on Airbnb right now during this meeting, and there's roughly 12 Airbnbs listed in Westchester Borough. NC1, NC2, I believe, are they're fine areas to expand Airbnb. The owners take good care of these homes. They have the ability to discriminate based upon their Airbnb score with the residents. As far as strangers coming in and out, if we don't do anything, then you're going to see more people coming in and out of places. But as far as any other issues, I checked with the police. There hasn't been any issues regarding Airbnbs that have been reported. And I think, like what Ms. Vaccaro said is, we're losing out, and our restaurants would lose out on Parents Weekend, or if grandparents want to come in and visit. If you look at the prices on these Airbnbs, they range anywhere from $85 at the cheapest to $327 per night. Up to $377 actually was the highest one. So people are going to be spending money, and I don't think they're going to be coming in to, trash places or anything along those lines. And again, I checked with the police, and there hasn't been anything reported. So I'm for the expansion of to NC1 and NC2.
So we would have to resolve parking, though. That's the one thing that I don't quite understand if we do expand it. I kind of agree. I think it's extremely restrictive the way it's written right now. There would be very little incentive, I think, for people to go into this versus just either go under the radar or do a long-term rental. So I think if we're going to do it, we do it.
Yeah, one of the things, some of the other ordinances I've seen is that in residential neighborhoods like NC1, NC2, you require one off-street parking space per every bedroom, thinking that if you have 4 bedrooms, you're going to have at least 4 other cars potentially. So, but I don't know how that, I'd like somebody to sort of take a look at that. We don't have a zoning officer, but I could work with somebody to look at like where the, some of the typical lots, and is there sufficient off-street parking? And it doesn't have to be, actually, one of the drafts that we had, it doesn't have to be on your property. If you have, your neighbor has a garage and they're willing to let you lease that for your short-term rental, as long as you demonstrate as part, before you get your rental permit, that you have a place where they're going to park, that would be one option.
Yeah, the question I also have is around the guest pass. Would these qualify for guest passes if they were?
Yeah, and we want Ramsey to weigh in on that, so.
Yeah.
So, and my understanding is also if there's still a few questions with the NC1 and NC2, it can always be that town center gets approved and then with a potential to fast follow with NC1 or NC2 as well, right? If there's a few questions that still have to be ironed out for those areas.
Yeah, I mean, that is where I think we were in December. And I think we were hoping to have the hearing to at least adopt the one for the town center, so that anything, one specifically, that appeal that we have tolling right now would be resolved. And then to the extent you wanted to continue the dialogue on the neighborhood districts, you could do that.
Really, for all intents and purposes, an expansion to NC1 and 2 and town center is pretty much all of the residential properties in the borough.
If we were to say we're going to pass this, we will allow Airbnbs and short-term rentals throughout NC1, NC2, and town center, but require parking for each bedroom, not necessarily on the property. But if you don't have it on the property, you have to show that you have access to it, whether it's in a public lot or a neighbor's lot. Can we agree on that as a, like, can we move forward with that?
So are you, are you all on the edge of making a motion? Because we still need to open it up to the public as well.
Sure, I'll make a motion to open Airbnbs in NC1, NC2, and Town Center with a requirement that parking per bedroom is required, one car per bedroom is required, but not necessarily on the site. That it is, that if you don't have it on site, you can prove that you can make it available either in public lots or some other rented units.
Ms. Vaccaro, I would support that, but I feel like we need to tighten it up a little bit, right?
But I think what,
Yeah.
I think what she's saying is instruct the solicitor to prepare an ordinance along those lines.
Yes.
And then, and I have the language already done because we worked on that. So I'm happy to pull that one back out, tighten it up a little bit and send it to you guys to make sure that's what you're thinking.
So I
that
second
work?
what
Okay.
Ms. Vaccaro said.
Thank you.
Any additional comment from,
I have, sorry, I have one more,
well, who goes first, Borough?
and I might have to amend the motion because I don't know, have we answered the question about student rentals? Is that in the, I did not.
Well, we don't have to add that, but we can for belt and suspenders, but a student home, the way it's defined, it's like a permanent dwelling establishment for students. It's not, it can't be transient.
So
But
this
we
would
can
be-
add that to make it absolutely clear.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
need to make that
sure.
bulletproof.
All right, comment from residents?
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. I don't see much of a benefit to the fourth ward. The majority of my block is not owner occupied, and permitting these on my block, which has had the longest term parking problem in the borough. We're area A for a reason. I don't see a benefit to it in my ward.
All right, I guess we call any other comments from out here? Okay, we'll call the motion to question.
Sure. Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
No.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Travis,
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni.
Yes.
It's 5-1.
Along those lines, back to you for your decide if you want to authorize us to move forward to the. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And I second that.
All right, any comments from, anyone, comments from anyone out in the audience? No? All right, Sean?
Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Travis.
Yes.
And Ms. Shimoni.
Yes. All right, any other business?
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Has anyone on council considered a traffic congestion committee? I'm aware there's building plan for East Market Street, West Market Street, South High Street. What's in the middle of that? Minor and High Street. I don't think taking out a lane is a good idea. I think you should study making a turn lane available. Traffic is getting worse. Do you know what a 53 on a truck trailer means? And I'm not referring to the famed fire company. We've had 53-foot tractor trailers in town. You want a vibrant uptown, you got to be able to put these trucks somewhere. And all I have been able to see is elimination of those areas. So good luck.
Thank you again. Any other business? All right, then this meeting is adjourned at 7:56 PM.